Herzlich willkommen zum UnleashPeople Podcast, dem Podcast für alle, die HR und Talent Acquisition strategisch denken. Wir, Ina und Christian, liefern euch gemeinsam mit Expertinnen und Experten regelmäßig frische Insights, die euch und euer Unternehmen voranbringen. Heute sprechen wir mit Marie Chaproniere, Gründerin der Behind the Mask Community, über Psychological Safety. Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of the UnleashPeople podcast. Today we speak about a topic that at least I believe is very important for everybody in the workplace, but for whatever reason it is overlooked most of the times or quite often. And to really deep dive into that, we have a very, let's call her famous guest in that area in this podcast, Marie. And today we will speak about psychological safety. So, Marie, what actually is psychological safety in the workplace? What's your opinion on that? And how would you describe an environment that actually is safe in a psychological perspective?
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Ina. Great to be here. And psychological safety is a huge topic. It's one of the most important for a thriving workplace. Psychological safety is the number one predictor of high-performing teams. And so for any organization that wants to have a thriving team, thriving organization, we need to have psychological safety. So what is it? Really, psychological safety for me is all about having agency. And your agency is, can I make decisions? Am I safe enough to speak up? How is it like in the workplace to be in control? Can I make choices? Can I express my ideas? And these are all parts of psychological safety, because without that, we don't feel seen and we don't feel heard. And without feeling seen and heard, we're less likely to be in an environment where we're able to put our best foot forward. And so that's essentially it in a nutshell. It isn't a nice to have within any organization. It's a must have if we want our teams to be happy and to thrive.
And that sounds so easy.
It sounds so easy, but it isn't. I mean, if we are creating environments where we're expecting also our employees to kind of fit into the environment and to conform to how we do things, that individual that's bringing themselves to work, are they able to challenge the status quo? Are they able to comfortably be creative and have freedom to express their ideas? And, it's not always about comfortability. That's not always the end goal. Am I comfortable to say what I need to say? But it's, I have something uncomfortable to talk about, to say. I want to challenge. I've got an idea. How do I feel when I express my ideas? How do I feel when I'm sharing, parts of myself that maybe don't necessarily belong here? And so if I am an individual that is feeling embarrassed or, dismissed when I come forward in the workplace, do I feel comfortable to speak up again? And maybe it's micro. We're not necessarily noticing these moments within our work environments, but you as an individual, you notice it within yourself, whether or not you're comfortable to step up and stand forward.
I have so many questions, but let me start with a little example, and coming from another side a little bit. I think 2 weeks ago or so, I made a LinkedIn post where I gave the recommendation that as a manager, you would just ask in a one-on-one, your team members on a scale from 1 to 10, how much did you like to come to work last week? And then I got a comment, and it's like, what's the percentage of people who would answer this honestly? So my reaction was a little bit funny, and I said, well, 100% more than compared to you not asking them. But that's a sign of and that I didn't comment, but that's a big sign of psychological safety. So if I, as a manager, asked my team member, did you really like to come to work last week or today or whatsoever, do I get an honest opinion? So coming from that, my question would be, how do you measure in a company psychological safety? Can you actually measure it? Is it a lot of different things you have to take into account? But when I want to start a project on psychological safety, my first attempt would be like, okay, I want to measure it. Where am I?
Yeah, I think it's possible to measure it. I think, first of all, it says a great amount about you and the organization if you're in a position where you also want to test the waters and see how comfortable people do feel to say what is on their mind. Am I comfortable and happy in my work environment or not? You can always anonymize these questions. People may not feel safe enough to share exactly how they're feeling in those environments. So allowing people to express themselves through anonymous surveys or promoter scores is a great way to be able to test and to measure this, at least initially. And I always think it starts with leadership as well. So we cannot be asking our employees to safely share with us if we are also not being honest and vulnerable about how we are doing ourselves. So it really starts there with leadership. And it's a great way to also build that trust within your teams, to start introducing those small steps into your meetings, sharing those parts of how you are doing, how the company is doing, how we are performing, how we're not performing, to show people that actually it's okay, and then use those examples or use mistakes as opportunities. That yes, mistakes happen, but what are we learning from them, and is it safe enough to openly own up to these mistakes?
Yeah.
That's sorry, Christian, move on.
I see a very common thread throughout almost all our episodes, to be very honest, and that's the leadership topic, right? Apparently, everything we do in the workplace, when it comes to anything related to HR, actually starts with leadership, and with a leadership that is able to create the respective environment within the company, within their teams, that everybody speaks out. And if that small piece is in place, apparently, almost everything else kind of follows suit in a way. So basically, it sounds a bit bad when I say it, right? But apparently, many companies have a very big leadership issue. And if that issue would be addressed, then a lot of other things would get solved with a lot of work, for sure. It's not a self-fulfilling prophecy. Proper leadership apparently has such a big impact into the company as a whole, in psychological safety, and that if that is in place, engagement increases, productivity increases, and in the end, you have a much bigger success as a company, like economical success, than you would have without a trained leadership, right? So
Absolutely.
I guess that's amazing that it really boils down to one thing, or a rather small thing in the company. And if you have that in place properly, it creates a trickle-down effect, and it's getting better and better and better. That being said, leadership, and I want to hear like your very honest opinion on that. I have an idea what you might say, but there are different perceptions on leadership, and quite often psychological safety is also equaled with the leader saying yes to everything. So that people-pleasing thing, that you say, you get this, you get that, all good. Please correct me.
I think you're spot on, absolutely. I mean, it is the foundation above structure, above skills, above autonomy. It is the foundation of building trust within our teams and getting the best out of our environments. And so, yes, I think that we have this leadership issue in the workplace, but I really think most of the time it's because we have leaders that are stepping into roles really essentially based on the skills and what they've delivered in their role. Maybe they've been a great high performer and they have been given a leadership role without proper care, without proper thought, without proper training. And actually the basis of being in the leadership role is, are we actually ready to build great leaders? And what does that truly mean? Because most of the time you're spending your time managing people, and people are complex. And we come into our workplaces with our own experiences, with our own past traumas. And so much of that time we're spending time trying to build trust within our employees. And actually, I think we see many leaders kind of going into that role where they are wanting to build high-performing teams. But of course, we can't build high-performing teams without mental strength within the organization as well. So I do think that we've spent a lot of our focus, or not spent enough focus, let's say, on building the right people and the right trust as a foundation within a business.
That's also like something that repeats a little bit of something we talked about in one of our last podcasts with the leaders who get promoted just because of their functional expertise and specialist knowledge. And that starts with recruiting, right? So Christian's topic, but like really defining what do I need and not forgetting about what's the people part of the position, being a leader. And also when you do internal promotions, really think about how can I assess if it's the right person, or do I have a career path that can get high and make a great career in the organization as an individual contributor and an expert, but not necessarily as a leader, because not everyone needs and should be a leader. That's one thing. And so,
and do they actually want to lead? What's the reason for being in a leading role? And I think a lot of that is also down to like career path trajectories, and not actually being in the position to role model and to create these more inclusive environments, which has a huge effect, of course, on how we're productive in the workplace. And we're linking a lot of this to the innovation, but if we're not giving people the environment to be creative and to be bold and to challenge, then we of course can't expect to have innovation on the team. I think especially with those managers that are often avoiding conflict, or they don't know how to admit to failures themselves.
I think there are two, also from my experience as an HR business partner, like two big things that apart from leadership, that affect psychological safety. The one is even if you maybe had a high level of psychological safety, and that's something I went through a couple of times already, and then you have something coming in, like a restructuring, where you have to let go a bunch of people. You do great communication, you prepare everything, and then what I saw in the past is that then the top leadership quickly says, oh, everyone is fine, we did a great job, we did an honest communication, and then the actual effect kicks in 6 to 12 months later, because that's the time people need to search for another job and so on. And suddenly great people are leaving. And so for me, that's also something very, very interesting, because you cannot avoid things like that to happen. Bad things do happen, and maybe you need to do a restructuring. What can you do to then rebuild or maintain the psychological safety as as a leader?
Yeah, I think change happens in all organizations. I mean, I've been through it myself, also within, acquisitions in organizations. And I think we see a lot of companies going through layoffs, and it's unavoidable. The key part is how we're treating our employees throughout that moment. And of course, psychological safety sits in radical candor and honesty, communication. How much you're sharing during those times. Are we looping people in? Do people know where they stand? Do they feel, how are they treated in that moment of change? Plays a key part in whether somebody wants to stay within the organization or not. Change is one of the predictors of burnout. And, burnout happens within organizations, of course, when people feel unsafe to fully be able to communicate exactly what is happening within the work environment. And so I think it's, we as leaders need to model imperfection, because change happens. We're not always going to be able to communicate exactly what we can, especially in HR. There's a lot of unspoken communication, things that we can say, things that we cannot say. And of course, that's hard for a leader. That's hard for somebody within HR. But again, like, how are we supporting our employees? But then also, are we showing up honestly? Are we showing people the hard parts? And are we actually open to saying, we don't have a clear vision of where we're at yet, but we're going to be keeping people informed as often as possible?
I guess that's a very big question, right? And that's the balancing act leaders have to do. And I know that we speak a lot about transparency, but in a business context, as you already said, Marie, transparency ends at a certain point. We cannot speak about everything in HR, even less than let's call him or a normal leader. But how do we do that then when we know something is happening and the team has a feeling, right? And it's not like that they know precisely what's going on, but overall the mood in the company changes. The mood in the leadership team is a bit different than before, right? So what is a good way to be as transparent as possible and as compliant as needed in that situation? What would be a good way? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, you're also like, it's a tough call. I think it also goes down to culture, right? What is the culture of the organization? Really going back to our values. And I think that even that is that is part of it, right? To also communicate that you cannot communicate everything right now. And people are, we're all adults. I think people are wise and smart enough to understand. But I think just, as simply as being honest with where you're at right now, gives people that safety of, okay, like, we don't know what we're doing. We don't quite have it all figured out yet, or there's not much that we can talk about, but you will hear again from us in so many weeks' time, or we'll keep you in the loop as possible, and leaving that door open for sense checking, for people to ask questions, whether that's through group meetings or one-on-ones or anonymity options. I think giving people the option to kind of check in definitely helps with those times where you're unable to be a bit more transparent within the organization.
And maybe on this one, just to add, and maybe I have a little bit of an unpopular opinion here, because I think the problem in a lot of cases is not compliance or things you cannot talk about. The problem in most cases, at least in my experience, is topics management company is afraid to talk about. They could talk about it way more open. So giving you an example, in one of the companies I worked for, we went through quite a financial crisis. We did not know what's going to happen. And there was a quite open communication. And then the employees came up with ideas like reducing their salary voluntarily, things like that. And I think in a lot of companies, I see that, we cannot talk about it. We cannot talk about it. Employees are not stupid. They see, as you said, that the management team is running around stressed. They have a lot of meetings. They do work for this company, so they also see if it's not running great. So be as transparent as you can be. And I think most of the stuff you can say. And even when it's like, we cannot talk about layoffs, then you have the rumors. So then at least I prefer to be open and say, like, I cannot guarantee that there won't be any layoffs, but I don't want this. And we are fighting as a leadership team to not have any layoffs. But with that transparency, at least from my experience, it worked way, way better than trying to hide, because they know, they just know.
Yeah, and I think we see this a lot, right? Even in one-on-one conversations, having these uncomfortable conversations is often what people are avoiding at all levels. You know, we do it in our relationships, we do it with our teams, in one-on-one meetings, avoiding feedback. If somebody comes to you with a problem, whether it's work-related or personal, we don't know how to have those conversations because they're often uncomfortable. The same with major layoffs. I think we've seen huge tech giants doing these on emails, avoiding that conversation. And it can be done in such a different way. And it sounds so simple on paper, but I think that's the crust of it is avoiding these conversations. But for me, it all stems back to, we cannot expect our employees to be open themselves, to feel comfortable, to challenge, again, to be creative, if we are not promoting that ourselves. It's all about reducing the fear at the end. This is much of what transparency is, right? To reduce the fear for somebody. I think it isn't difficult, but we make it difficult. We make it difficult within ourselves because it's uncomfortable, but actually we can learn so much more from having those uncomfortable conversations. We can avoid team members handing in their resignations or leaving or bad press by stepping into the uncomfortable, because that, in the end, that does reduce the fear. It does reduce the fear, builds trust. And of course, that's what psychological safety is in the end.
Yeah, that's very important, and I just want to emphasize it one more time, right? For people to really realize it, that psychological safety does not mean all conversations are easy and that everything should be comfortable. I guess you should be not afraid to do that conversation. You should not fear backlash or punishment after that conversation, because, as you said, Marie, we always have conversations we don't want to do, we don't like to do in the partnership, with friends, with everybody, right? So that's normal. But when I kind of speak about that, like with my wife, there are topics I don't want to speak about, and she as well, right? But we do it because we know it's fine, and after that, everybody is feeling better, and it's the same, maybe not as deep as in a relationship, but in the workplace. The goal should be that you speak about everything that relates to your work relationship, and then that also includes topics that are not comfortable, that you are also maybe worried about, right? But as long as you know you can speak about it, it's okay. And that should be the final environment you want to operate in. And I also think it's not a one-way road, because what you said earlier, Ina, is that sometimes leadership is afraid to speak about things. And maybe, and that's just an assumption on my end, right? They are afraid of the reaction of the people. That it kind of comes back, oh, that's bad leadership. What did you do? You messed up things, and now we have to suffer. So when we speak about psychological safety, that also means that I or we as leaders need to feel safe enough to speak about those things. Because if we don't, how can we be so transparent, and how can we address the topics with our teams that need to be addressed, right? So the more I think about it, the more complicated it gets. So it's not so easy as we think it is, and as we all said, right? It's easy on paper, but in real life, it's a completely different story.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's not, it shouldn't be as complicated as we make it. It is difficult. But then if we link psychological safety to retention, if we link it to burnout, if we link it to performance, and if we go back to initially, where I mentioned that it's the number one predictor of high performance and high performing teams, then it shouldn't become as difficult to have these conversations, because we know the data, the statistics are out there, that we have, we are 5 times more likely to bring high delivering teams if we have psychological safety as a foundation, as a trust builder within the organization. One of the best workplaces that I had been in, we had this constant reminder through all communications of values. And one of our values was around making mistakes, that it's okay to make mistakes. And there's great examples that can come from making mistakes in leadership and as employees. And as I already said, like, if we can turn those mistakes into wins, again, that's building trust and psychological safety. But he always gave this great example of a salesperson that got a bit trigger happy one day on the CRM system, and thought they'd make a couple of tweaks on the email to rewrite it, something that would be an outreach email to all potential customers. And they saw the conversion rate drop so low from a couple of tweaks in this email. And the whole entire sales team was trying to understand, like, what had happened? Why has our conversion rates dropped? And we had this junior salesperson on the team that was so afraid at the time to say, actually, that was me and I'd done something wrong. But in the end, they had, and they thought they had rewarded this salesperson for coming forward, for telling them, because they were able to spot, actually, what you did, although it's a mistake, we know now by changing a couple of those words in our outreach email, our conversions dropped. So our previous email had actually been working really, really well. And so without that person kind of stepping forward and owning up and sharing the mistake, they never would have truly understand what had happened. So I always love this example, because it's a great way to say, what, we can make mistakes. To this person, it was the end of their career, but actually it was a great thing, because we were able to understand what had happened within our sales outreach and find something good from it. And this is a story that is shared from our leader with all of the onboarding and with all of the meetings, to say that, the moral of the story is that it's actually okay to make mistakes, and you can do that here.
And that's really so important to... sorry, Christian.
That really triggers the scientist in me, right? Because it wasn't a mistake. It was a new approach. And there was a result. The result was not as good as somebody hoped for, right? But it's a result, and then you learn from it and just change it again. And as you said,
Exactly.
after that, you knew the other outreach email actually was really, really good. So it's a learning. It's not a mistake. But that's just my science background. Sorry, Ina.
Yeah, it's a learning and a mistake, right? And I think that's the whole point. Even when we, if we look at how we're communicating layoffs and big decisions, or avoiding, filling in other managers when decisions need to be made because they just need to be done. What is the effect that it's having on those people around you? What effect are these things having on the team? Once we're able to understand and measure the effects, and we see most of the time the outcome is losing great employees, is a drop in performance. It does lead to burnout. It does cause mental health challenges and so on. And when we're linking these things and truly understanding, I think we can hopefully, Christian, learn from those, rewire and learn how to build and to do things differently for the next time. We know that by avoiding conversations with employees on performance and just firing them because they haven't performed is not a great way to lead and to manage. There's obviously better ways to be able to do this. If we had been able to communicate with that employee, to have honest conversations, to guide them, to help them before we get to the firing, can improve a lot, not only with the employee but you as a leader.
Yeah.
And this data is also for us in HR so important, so that we work with that to bring the organization forward, because this feedback is important. You have to talk to your employee about performance on a regular basis. That's like that preaching you hear. I hear it since years and years and years. But if you approach the leaders in a bit of a different way and you really use the data in a proper way, it's easier for them to step out a little bit more out of their comfort zone. I just had that discussion when it came to feedback. So there was a wish, like, we need an open feedback culture in our organization. And then I started with, okay, hey, let's do it on leadership level. And then we do very easy keep, start, stop feedback in the whole round, not anonymous. Because, hey, on the leadership level, my expectation was a bit of a different one. And that was, first reaction was like in front of all the others, yes. And then I even had the great idea of, hey, you do your feedback round in the leadership team, and then afterwards you step in front of your teams. That's something I do with my teams, or I used to do, and say like, hey, this is the feedback I got, and those are my two topics I'm a little bit weak on, that I want to work on in the next 3, 6, 12 months. Stepping out and not only talking about what I can do good, but also talking about, hey, okay, that's something I'm not good at and I will try to work on. And only if you manage that on the top leadership level and be very vulnerable, authentic, and honest, then you can bring that into the organization. And then you also tackle those things like in performance management, so that managers learn to, at an early stage, tell their employees, hey, this and this, maybe you can do better next time, so that at the end of the year, I hate those end of the year performance management annual talks, but there shouldn't be any surprises, right?
Absolutely. And I love this model, the start, stop and continue. I think it's a great way, because it's really action oriented, right? And it's great for growth. It's not too offensive when you're receiving the feedback. But of course, absolutely, I love that you've had these open conversations with the leadership team all together. And I think as a whole, as a group, to be able to acknowledge and understand and also recognize how you can grow and develop as a group, and then share that back with your team in a practical way. It becomes then a habit, right? As opposed to a forced performance review, which we're often seeing, maybe on a 6-month basis or annual within some organizations. This is a continuous development cycle.
Yeah, and that's actually a very good end statement, because we are already coming to the end of this recording. I have the feeling that we could speak much more about it, and I know we could speak much more about it, and we actually just scratched on the surface of this topic. So let us think what we could do as a potential follow-up conversation, because for me that topic is crucial for company success. And you linked it to everything, Marie, right? In the end, it is very, very strongly connected to company performance. And that is what we are looking for in the end. We need a company that is successful, because if it isn't, we all lose our jobs. And that's the sad truth, right? So why not look into it much, much more? So, Marie, thank you very much for joining in this conversation. It was really, really insightful. And yeah, I wish you a very nice rest of the day. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Das war's für heute. Vielen Dank, dass ihr bis zum Ende dabei geblieben seid, und bis zum nächsten Mal.